Dr. Michael Martirano is superintendent of the State Department of Education, joins us on Metro News Talkline. Dr. Martirano, good morning. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning, sir. Glad to be with you this morning.
How many standards, is there a numeric value? How many standards were there under the previous Common Core-based standards, and how many of those are proposed to be changed under the new standards?
We have, once again, starting with the fact that the Common Core standards pertain to the expectations of what children are expected to learn in our grade levels in both the reading language arts area and in the math area. So we have over hundreds of standards in pre-K through 12. The recommendations came back with specific standards for over 100 revisions that we've taken back from the WVU work that was done. And specifically, we've incorporated those into the newly developed standards, of which we've now have posted for a 30-day review.
Dr. Martirano, I understand that they're under the current standards. It gets confusing after a while, but under the current Common Core-based standards that we have now, there's something like 900 standards. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
That's
then
true.
The proposal is to change about, as you just mentioned, about 100 of them. So given that, is it fair to say, or how do you say, well, we're repealing and replacing the Common Core-based standards when, in fact, most of those standards will remain in place?
Well, and that's the conversation piece that needs to be had all across. Whether they're from West Virginia, Massachusetts, Florida, or whatever state, the standards of which we had in place before the Common Core standards, there's a level of commonality that exists. So, for example, I always use the example Algebra 1. Algebra 1, for the most part, is Algebra 1 no matter what state you're in, no matter what school system you're in. There's a level of commonality regarding that. What has made the shift is things that were excluded and included that didn't have that higher level of connection to higher education. So regardless of what we call the standards or where they are, where the previous standards were, there's a level of commonality of what first graders are expected to learn, what second graders are expected to learn, and what you would expect in each one of the content area. So when we did the conversion prior to my arrival, when they did the conversion from the previous standards to the Common Core standards, what is defined as next gen, there was about an 80% commonality in that sense.
Okay.
But we've now listened to what that concern is and making the adjustments to develop the West Virginia College and Career Ready standards.
In other words, when you changed from whatever we had to the new next generation Common Core standards, it wasn't like, okay, we throw out the old 900 and put in the new 900. There was a lot of compatibility, is what you're saying.
There is. I mean, I can't think of a better word. You've used compatibility, commonality, that when you start, and I've been through these, you do your crosswalk, you make your comparison to where you were, and then you use language and you insert expectations to take them to a higher level for what young people were expected to know and learn by the end of that grade level or course.
And Dr. Martirano, I understand that in the proposed new standards, which are, called the West Virginia College and Career Readiness Standards, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So under these proposed new standards that you all have included cursive writing and multiplication tables. Is that correct? And why are those included?
So it is. So again, from the very beginning through the legislative process, I said I want to listen to our community. I want to listen to our teachers. Give me time to do this work as a state superintendent, recognizing the concerns. If you remember also, there were very little times that people told me what the specific concerns were with the existing set of standards. So we took this to the community, to our entire state. We received over 250,000 comments from 4,000 individuals. Hoppy, that is historical in terms of a high level of transparency. So throughout that, thematically, what we heard was the need for cursive writing explicitly needs to be there. I'm from the ilk that says that young people need to learn how to print, they need to learn cursive writing, and they also need to know keyboarding. So we need to make certain they understand those all those skills. For example, the Declaration of Independence is written in cursive writing. How can young people read that if they don't know how to do cursive writing? How can they sign their signature if they don't know that? It's a skill that builds upon printing, cursive writing, as well as then the use of keyboarding for 21st century skills. The other thing is the aspect of multiplication tables. There's a critical need for foundational knowledge to what we always define as a level of automaticity with a level of just understanding how to do that, better known as rote memorization, how I was taught in school to learn those multiplication tables. But where we fail is then the application of the knowledge from those multiplication tables, how we apply that to number sense and patterns. So we explicitly put that in there for young people to have the foundation of both cursive writing as well as then the multiplication tables. And another critical piece is that there's a lack of rigor in the math standards that I've reviewed, is the fact that we only went up to a certain level in math, and now I've insisted that we include calculus, because once we have calculus in our standards, if young people are selecting that as an elective, that is a true level of high-level math for college readiness.
Do you believe, Dr. Martirano, that the changes that are being proposed will satisfy the most ardent critics of Common Core in West Virginia?
Well, it is my hope, sir, because I have been so collaborative and so receptive to hearing people's concerns. I have listened to people's concerns, from the people who are opposed to Common Core to the people who support it, and trying to find a ground that moves us forward as a state. There's a lot of concern about this, and it's being very disruptive to our teachers and to our students in our classrooms with this constant shift from standards year to year. So it is my hope, and a very optimistic viewpoint, that the individuals involved in this will listen to what we've had, that we're making as a recommendation, and use this 30-day period, Hoppy, to really, once again, this is a second opportunity now to provide input for how we can improve it. Ultimately, my goal as state superintendent is to get these standards embedded so that they can last the test of time for several years, so that we're not constantly disrupting our classroom teachers. So I am hopeful and optimistic that the leadership of the legislature will come together, ask the questions necessary, and support the movement of which we're advancing forward. Again, today I'll be talking to Lucia and continuing that process to educate individuals of how we can improve it.
Dr. Michael Martirano is with us, State Superintendent of Schools, School Board voting Friday to put out for discussion for the next 30 days standards. It's called repeal and replace of the current Common Core base standards with new standards called the West Virginia College and Career Readiness Standards. I would imagine, of course, teachers are in the classroom right now doing their job, but when teachers heard about this, do you think they rolled their eyes, Dr. Martirano, and said, well, wait a minute, now we got it, now we have new standards we have to teach to? Have you got any well, they would have provided feedback, I'm sure, during the 90-day comment period. What did you hear from them, and what do you expect their reaction to be when they say, oh, okay, here we go again?
Well, and again, that's where my heart and my concern and my focus is in this thought process. First and foremost, as I said, those 4,000 individuals who provided feedback, many of them were our teachers. I listen to our teachers who are educational experts in our state. I don't need individuals from outside the state telling us what to do. I listen to our teachers who I put great credibility and faith into, and our teachers were provided this feedback and provided how we can improve them, from the developmental appropriateness to the numbering of it to how we need to appropriately align this for the future. And so I'm very pleased in that sense, and I think there's a high level of receptivity towards it. How we do this is very artfully, and knowing that the teachers, many of them have requested this, is that this will be very helpful, because this is not being thrust from down upon them, from up above, as they always say. This is part of the process where they provided the feedback to us, and we in turn have responded in kind. And that's how you want those processes and these systems to work. Listen to your teachers, because they will guide us to academic improvement. I am convinced of that.
Dr. Martirano, do these new standards address, or is my question going to be about curriculum, that this will deal with one of the most common complaints heard over the last year about public education in West Virginia is that I tried to help my child with his or her math homework and I didn't understand what they were trying to do?
Well, and that is part of the curriculum, but I always have to take that recognition into it. As we are moving forward, that the educational process is much different than how many of our parents were educated and how I was educated. So there is that level of application, different ways of solving problems, and critically thinking. So another component of this is ongoing communication with our parents and our schools, how our schools can have curriculum nights and activities for how a parent can help their child with the educational process. We need to do a better job of that, and we need to educate our parents as partners in the educational process. And that's my goal as we roll this out, to have ongoing communications in schools with our parents about curriculum. I hear that often, but I also heard it prior to these kind of standards as well. Every place I ever worked, there reaches a threshold where parents say, I just can't help my child anymore, but I'm going to be taking a critical eye to that to provide that support.
Dr. Martirano, follow me on this, that the new test, which this past year was the first year for the test, was the Smarter Balanced standardized test. We had a number of problems with that. I'm not going to get into those, but the point being that the Smarter Balanced test is going to be given again next year. Well, the Smarter Balance test is based on the current Common Core standards.
Correct.
And also these test results are going to be used with the new program to grade our public schools in West Virginia. So if we're going to change standards, if in fact the school board approves these new standards, and if we're going to use these new standards, is it fair to grade the schools going forward based on a test that is tuned to standards we're getting rid of?
So that's an excellent question. So if people understand the larger process here, you have to do this very methodically and very thoughtful. So the first thing in place that we are approaching is, as I've communicated with our legislature in a very thoughtful manner, in our school board, is the fact that we need to get our standards right. At the same time on Friday, I announced a commission that will now study our assessments and our accountability system to ensure that they are aligned properly. The key word is alignment, so that you have that right assessment to give you the right information so that we can provide the grading information for school improvement. So as we're moving forward now, we have the process in place where we'll have 2 years of comparative data. We'll be able to provide that information to our schools based upon Smarter Balance. And then hopefully a seamless transition will occur as we continue that. But again, the goal is that we just can't come in here with a hatchet and cut everything out. I have to be very concerned about the transitions and make certain it is very clear about providing the clear standards, the assessment that aligns, and the accountability measures. So it's a lot of hard work that has to occur, but ultimately work worth doing because it's helping our children and it's supporting our teachers.